Okay, happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Actionable Innovations Conversations. My name is Lucy Gray. I'm the co-founder of this professional learning community, and we're excited to have you here today. You may be watching on LinkedIn Live, if I got the event set up correctly, definitely on YouTube, and definitely in Hopin and uh, and Facebook. So if you are watching us today and and you want to interact with us, the best place to do that is on Hopin, and I can give you the link to that in a minute. If you're not there right now, but the most interaction happens in Hopin, in the platform that we're using. But we will be looking at the comments in other platforms and we'll respond as we can. To see the whole thing in action, though, it's really best to be in Hopin. So just an FYI. And I have had a busy day today, so I need to take a deep breath. Our community is Actionable Innovations Global, and what we're trying to do here is support and inspire education leaders. We host conversations like this to inspire people. We write about global educational innovations on Medium, and we advise, advocate, and consult around educational innovation in general. We used to be known as the Global Education Conference Network, and we now are known as Global Actionable Innovations Global, and we host a conference every November called GLOW, aka Global Learning for an Open World. So that's a little bit about us. And we do these conversations as we find interesting people, and we hope that you'll find us on other platforms as well to check out our social media. You can scan the QR code here and find us on Medium, Twitter, YouTube, and our LinkedIn group. You can also join our main community at actionableinnovations.global as well. We have about 30,000 members in that community, and you're welcome to join and share your work however you see fit. Right now we're kind of thinking about future professional development events, virtual ones in particular. And we're interested in getting input from people in our community. So if you're watching this live or later, perhaps, please take a look at our survey, and we would love to have your feedback about what kinds of events would be most useful to you as an educator. Some of the things that we're thinking about doing are a youth summit, an event for education consultants to network with each other, and an Apple technology specific event. So we're open to other ideas and want to know what is most useful to educators these days. So we'd love to have you participate in the survey at bit.ly/AI Global Future Events. Today, if you're listening anywhere, we would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're from, what your role is. And if you want to share your LinkedIn profile or your Twitter handle, that's fine too, so that we can follow you and vice versa. And if you want to tweet out any insights from today or invite other people in, you can via Global Ed 23 is our hashtag that we use. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Aaron. Aaron is an educator who I recently became acquainted with, and he is working for Unrulr, which is a really nifty new ed tech tool that will help you document student learning. Welcome, Aaron. We're excited to have you here today.
A huge mahalo for having me.
Yeah.
Honored, grateful, bit of imposter syndrome, but I'll work through it.
Yeah. Well, I read the article, the piece that you wrote in for Getting Smart. You have authored several pieces for them, and you've had a really untraditional path through education, your own personal education, and as an educator. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and how this has all emerged for you?
Totally. I'll start with ancestry. My grandfather's a Holocaust survivor,
Oh, wow.
and the only reason he survived is he was sent to a slave labor camp because he was a tool and die manufacturer. He had a trade and skill, and has this incredible story really rooted in craftsmanship and his ability to be a storyteller, and had that experience of being able to emigrate to the U.S., working as a janitor and retiring in Long Island, running the tool and die industry in New York City. And I would go to his house in Long Island. I remember the carpet, like the shag 70s
Yeah.
carpeting. I remember everything about it. And we would sit, he'd be in this kind of big chair, and he would talk about this need of having a craft, this need of also having evidence and being able to kind of document who you are and what you've achieved. And that always stuck with me. That has really impacted my journey as an educator. It's also impacted why I work for Unrulr, which is really a kind of evidence and documentation tool, and has allowed me to live this kind of really mission-based life. On the flip side, I grew up in Lesotho the first 7 years of my life, a really communal learning culture in Southern Africa, and really struggled when I moved to Massachusetts, which was not the most communal learning
Yeah.
culture,
Yeah.
which I talk about in that Getting Smart article.
Yes, right.
And I kind of floundered in international development, really kind of having metrics of success rooted to wealth as opposed to, mission and bettering the world. But when I moved to Hawaii, where my wife is from, I found my calling as an educator. And it was amazing to be transported back to Lesotho in many ways, in a culture where community was incredibly important, where learning was authentic and built in relationships. And in Hawaii is where I found Unrulr. I used the tool first when I was a K-12 capstone coordinator at a teacher at a school in Hawaii, and viewed it as a revolutionary tool in my classroom. And so that was kind of my journey into what I'm doing now.
Oh, wow. That's a great story. Going back to your grandfather, I need to ask this
Yeah,
because I'm intrigued. I just finished watching Ken Burns' documentary on the Holocaust and,
yeah.
and the U.S. involvement or lack of involvement in saving people. And so where was your grandfather? What country did he come from? Where
He was in
was he?
Germany. He was in first in Alsace-Lorraine and then in Berlin. There's so many crazy elements of the story. My
Uh,
great grandmother was sent to a concentration camp. My grandfather escaped the slave labor camp and got a wheelbarrow, met some GIs, put the wheelbarrow in the back of the truck, traveled miles and miles to his mother, found her alive. And I actually had
wow.
many experiences with my great grandmother and saw her with a tattoo on her arm.
Wow.
Um, and that really stuck with me,
Yeah.
and his ethos um, of personal empowerment, of having agency over one's education and one's career, has always been a core ethos of who I am, and also has been a core ethos of the educational communities that I've had the privilege of co-creating alongside learners and incredible teachers and educators.
There in college, I read a book. And I'm trying to think the name of it. I read it for an anthropology course, and it was about a Jewish senior citizens center in Venice Beach, California.
Mm,
And there was a documentary made about it too that won an Academy Award, and I'm blanking on the name of it. I loved this book, and I should have a copy of it now. But it talks a big thesis in that book is the love of education, how that's a central theme in all these people's lives, that they never stopped learning. That was um, a big core value. And I'll have to think of what the name of it was. But
mm.
I think I wonder, these days if I heard somebody who was it Tyson, Neil deGrasse. I'm blanking on his name,
Neil
but
deGrasse Tyson.
yeah, yeah. He was on some show this last week and said, talking about AI and all the things that are going on. And he said, this is going to appeal to, kids who are not interested in learning, but just getting this stuff done for grades.
Totally, 100%.
And I thought, why are we not
Yep.
focusing on, that love of learning? I think every teacher you talk to says, I want my students to develop a love of learning. Well, how do you measure that? And, I think that's going to be something that we get into with Unrulr in a little while. I'm going to do the next little thing that we usually do here is we do this Prus Questionnaire. And I only know how to spell it or pronounce it because somebody corrected me at one point. It's not Proust, it's Proust. But Don Buckley, my partner in crime with this webinar series, he's written an article, and I'll see if I can post it in the chat for people who are looking. He took the Vanity Fair thing at the back of the magazine and turned it into kind of an education questionnaire,
Super cool.
and answered it in one of our Medium posts. And so we like to kind of ask a few of these questions just to kind of break the ice before we get started. And I'm wondering, what's your perfect idea of happiness, Aaron?
Mm.
That's a tough one, I know.
Happiness is with others. Like
Yeah.
for me, happiness is outdoors. It's with people that are on a shared mission. Living in Hawaii, there's a lot of metaphors with the canoe and being out in the water with others. Um, Happiness is reflection and having time to reflect. Happiness is joy and bringing joy to others.
Yeah. And gratitude, and that's embedded in that too, I think.
Totally.
For me, it's similar. I think back to my family and I have spent a lot of time in Jackson Hole, and just sitting there looking at the mountains. I need a dose of those mountains every few years. I need to be able to look at them and take them all in, and the smells of that area too. The sage and everything is amazing. And I particularly am thinking right now of a moment where we had picked up my son at camp there, and we'd gone to this one lodge that has huckleberry milkshakes, and we got our huckleberry milkshakes and went outside, and it's right in front of the Tetons, and just sat there and watched, time go by. And so for me, that's has a lot of the elements you're talking about. I'm together with my family in nature, surrounded by beauty. And it's really important, I think, in this day and age, to take time to appreciate that sort of thing. And right now here in Chicago, it's not quite the same. It's we just got 7 inches of snow, and um, so especially in February in Chicago, you want to think of those wonderful moments. Here's another question for you. Which words or phrases do you most overuse? And for Don, he always says amplify. I think that's his word that he always overuses. For me, it's probably awesome. I really despise that word, but I say it a lot.
Um, I would say amplify is one of mine. Vibrant is one of mine. Verdant is one of mine. Resplendent is a word I totally overuse. Words that aren't typically
Those
overused.
are great words to be
Um,
overusing.
Amazing is a word I overuse. Crunchy when I'm describing really great content.
Yeah.
Our director of marketing will probably get a laugh at that.
I
And
say,
joy. And I have no problem overusing joy. I mean, I
yeah,
think for me, the ethos of our product and my work is bringing joy and human connection to learning communities. And so I am unabashedly using both of those phrases.
that's great. And I think we need more joy these days. And it's, yeah, I think as we emerge from the pandemic and reconnect with each other, that should be, front and center for sure. What is your greatest? This is a little negative, but I'm going to ask it because I don't think we've asked anybody this question yet. What is your greatest regret? I don't know if I could answer that myself. I guess for me, I would say I wish I'd led a life where I wasn't so apprehensive of doing bold things. So, for instance, in college, after college, I would have loved to have gone in the Peace Corps, but I was too chicken to do it. So, what is your greatest regret so far in life?
Oh, I've got so many, but I've got
Yeah.
so many that I can keep working on.
Yeah.
My biggest regret is not doing the personal work that's required to be an amazing husband and to be an amazing dad. All of that beautiful joy and harm that we
Yeah.
get from our parents that require some deep inner work, right? And my
Yeah.
wife has done the Brene Brown, Glennon Doyle podcasts and books that have allowed her to transform and grow immeasurably.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to do that work as a 37-year-old, and it's impacted my life as a teacher,
Yeah.
the relationship I have with my 6-year-old son and 10-year-old daughter, and the catch up I have to do to be able to catch up to a wife I've totally married outside of
Yeah.
my ballpark. I'm like single A and she's majors or Hall of Fame, and so trying to catch up is really important in that space. The other regret, I wish I would have taken a sabbatical when
Yeah.
both my kids were born. I wish I would have really spent those first, years just with them. So many times as teachers, we're enmeshed in the lives of others, and we're throwing ourselves and trying to better the lives of middle schoolers and high schoolers. Um, and I'm doing that now with my own kids, but I kind of wish I would have been an even better dad kind of in the earlier stages of their life.
I knew when I had my first kid that something would have to change in order. There's no way I could have taught the way I was teaching and taken care of a child.
Right.
So I took a couple years off, and it was great. It was a
Yeah.
luxury to be able to do that. Um, so I understand what you're talking about with that, and it's such an intensive period of life, when your kids are really little and you're still in that.
Especially
Everything.
during COVID,
Yeah, yeah.
small
Oh, I
child.
can't imagine. I cannot imagine how that was. Oh my gosh. My kids were in college and kind of, they were, stuck in their rooms and they liked it. So it wasn't. I think it took its toll on them in different ways, but I didn't have to manage them. I didn't have to entertain them. I didn't have to um, do the things that, parents of young children had to do during the pandemic that are a little bit more, effort oriented, I guess. So anyway, so I think, what's impressive, Aaron, about what you're saying too about your journey in terms of your relationships with your family. Uh, you ha- you think you just started that journey, but you were much more aware than I know of other people at your stage of life. So kudos to you for embarking and self on that journey of self improvement. Um, what occupation would you choose? Here's the last question. If you were not in education, what occupation would you choose for yourself?
My first hipstery answer would be as a stonemason.
Ooh.
I met my wife in Haifa, northern Israel, and apprenticed as a stonemason, and absolutely loved it. Was horrible at it.
Yeah.
I'm not a tactile learner, and I had the most patient kind of master stonemason as a
Wow.
teacher. But it's definitely something I'd love to kind of grow in.
That's great. So you could build your own house in Hawaii down the road, maybe.
I
Is
think
this
that's the goal. That's the dream.
I don't know what I would do differently. International relations was always interesting to me. Journalism, it still is. Journalism was always something that was intriguing to me. I thought it would be great to be a writer and travel the world and tell other people's stories. But one thing I've been intrigued with that I don't think I would have even thought of as a career before is working as a producer for a news show or doing something on a movie set, because I find it intriguing, and I know nothing about filmmaking or media in general, but I find it interesting how teams rapidly put together content that's of high quality. Like I'm thinking, I'm a big fan of Rachel Maddow's show, and how every single night she's only on once a week now, but all those shows, they're producing at a high level rapidly. There's no room for error really. And it just the all the people and all the different things that have to go in to make that production happen, I think is intriguing. And I have no idea what happens behind the scenes in movies, but I think it would be really fascinating to be like a fly on the wall and see how that happens. So that's what I would do if I were not in education and working with schools and companies and teachers on a regular basis. So okay, so let's get to talking about Unrulr. I'm going to take away these slides and um, hopefully there we go. And now we can have a heart to heart about Unrulr. And you may want to where do you want to start? Do you want to give us a little tour of it first, or would you like me to start plying you with questions about Unrulr?
I'll start with the origin story,
Okay.
and then I'll show it a little bit, and then we
Okay.
can stop the demo. You can ask questions, and then I can dive back into it too. We can go back
Okay.
and forth, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and I'll put the link here for people who are interested. Unrulr.com without the e in it is the link to what Aaron's going to be talking about.
Yeah, the branding is all about measuring what's hard to measure, or determining what doesn't need to be measured, but you actually just like to live in education as well. And that's where the Unrulr name and branding come from. Unrulr was founded by Fred Delsey and Will Rapun, two rock star entrepreneurs in Hawaii. And Will Rapun comes from this family of instigators. His family is famous for suing the federal government for water rights for Native Hawaiians. And Will graduated from Punahou and Harvard, and knew how to play the game of classic education, but did not feel like himself as someone of indigenous descent, someone as a Native Hawaiian, was represented in either experience in Punahou in Hawaii or at Harvard as a comp sci major, and created Unrulr to bring cultures of storytelling and agency and documentation into learning, and not necessarily disrupt education, a kind of cliche term that we hear a lot in the space of ed tech and entrepreneurship, but really to bring education back to what it always was, which was communal, which was relational, and to have a technology that's much more joyful, that allows learners to build these incredible living and breathing portfolios for themselves, but to also kind of have a group portfolio, a group communal space, a private community, whether it's their class or cohort, whether it's a nonprofit using it or a philanthropic fund thinking about documentation and community building in a different way. My journey to Unrulr is my first job in education was as a webmaster at a school called Hawaii Preparatory Academy on the Big Island of Hawaii. Dream place to grow and live. And I had to build this website. The old website looked like it was from the 90s. And I knew I had to have a student team to do it. And it just came as common sense. You have the client be the content creator. And I formed a team. I told them I'd build out their LinkedIn profiles as payment. And we built this incredible and beautiful website filled with authentic stories. I got money from admissions, and I built an videography team. We took drones across the Big Island and used the school's vision statement. And I started teaching digital journalism, and I eventually became the K-12 capstone coordinator at the school and founded a nonprofit, a summer program that is all about youth entrepreneurship on the side, partnering with others. And throughout this experience, I struggled and grappled with documentation and evidence. Throughout this experience, I grappled with authenticity. And when grades entered the equation, soul left the room, right? Agency left the room. We now were doing something for someone else. And so I was desperately seeking and ideating and drawing out actually what Unrulr was on napkins and on Google and Google Docs. And when I saw Unrulr in this kind of musty office at Kamehameha Schools on Oahu while I was getting my master's, I started crying, zero hyperbole. And I am one that's quick to cry. I'll definitely say that. But it was what I had dreamed for, right? It was what allowed the K-12 capstone program that I was building, the senior capstone program. It allowed us to do the real work and allowed process and reflections to be captured and allowed students to manifest their ideations of their projects, their research kind of out into the world as well. And so that was my journey to this tool that's really been a wireframe for students in schools as they build out their identities and what they're working on too.
So it you just magically came together and what you'd been envisioning was what they had produced?
So I
I mean,
mean,
that's unbelievable. It's
in
amazing.
many ways, and I'm in Evan Beachy's office. He's blasting Pete
Yeah.
Rock and Jay Dilla, two of my favorite musicians, and I knew this guy is cool. And he pulled out his mobile phone and he said, "I have to show you what my cousin Will is working on." And I was confused because I've never seen learning done well on a mobile device. And I saw the ability for Evan to take his competencies and the skills he wants his students to utilize and to have every time his learners post tag one of those competencies. And that solved a huge problem for me in assessment, in documentation. One of the things I grappled with was, how do I show rigor? How do I fight the imposter syndrome of PBL and deeper learning? How do I show the other teachers that are teaching APs that we are doing complex, interdisciplinary 21st century work? And I saw it. And what was so important when I
Mm.
saw it was that multimedia was key. This multimodality of allowing learners to take imagery and video and audio and have them be more important than a test score or a long bullshit narrative essay, right? That is just commodifying and they're just finessing the system to figure out hashtag chat GPT, right? I wanted irrefutable evidence of their growth, of who they are, of their process and product. And that's what I was seeing. And I was a teacher. I was kind of that
Mm,
early adopter, and I pushed on, I want this feature. I want to see
mm,
this. And when the time came for me to join this team, right, to take less of a salary and more equity because I really believed in the
yeah.
product, right? Um, I jumped at it because I viewed it as a way to scale my vision, probably our shared vision of education around learner agency, around learners going from passive to active in their education and being able to build these rich, living kind of portfolios and evidence of who they are.
One of the things that I am concerned about in terms of equity is not just access to tools and technology for students, but also our expectations and our pedagogical beliefs that support learners.
Mm,
And um, and we have a question too that we'll get to in a second from an audience member. But one of the things that concerns me is that we expect kids from less resourced areas who may not be, traditionally achieving in the same ways as where we would like them to be. There's this attitude of if we work them harder, if they're more in school longer, if they're doing more drill and practice kind of things, it can make up for any supposed deficits. And I feel like there's been a lot of tools developed in the ed tech world for that kind of purpose, for remediation or whatever. And it doesn't feel very, to me, what attracted me to technology in the first place was the potential of um, of students and teachers to interact with the world through technology and to show what they know with technology. And so what I've found really intriguing about your tool is that it's really different. I have not seen anything like this to date in terms of a tool that allows students to take control and publish and show what they know. Um, and I think the idea too, and maybe this is a good time for you to show what's about. But Emily has a question, and this might be a good time to answer before we transition. What are your favorite ways to measure student growth in digital education platforms? And I think, and if anybody's in the audience too, feel free to jump in and post a comment if you have ways that are your favorite ways for student growth to be measured.
I'm
Aaron, do you want to address that at all?
authentically,
Yeah.
right? As authentically as humanly possible. So one of the cool things about this tool, and you can try it in different spaces as well, is to take your portrait of a graduate, to take your
Yeah.
competencies, to take your skills and values, and when learners are documenting evidence, for them to decide what competency it represents, to give them agency from the get-go on saying this is an example of empathy, this is an example of critical thinking, right? And have other learners engaged in that process as well. One of the things Will, our CEO, says a lot is when learners know that their work is being viewed, they're much more likely to
Yeah.
document.
Yeah.
And when you make assessment, actionable feedback that benefits their project, that is very rare in education, right?
Yeah.
Assessment is usually a place where learning goes to die.
And
And when
it's
you can make
tedious for
go for it, and
teachers.
it's tedious and it's annoying, and we all wink at each other, right,
Yeah.
throughout that
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
right? And we give some random extra credit assignment,
But
right? But like when
if you're actually seeing what they're doing and it's coming from the
totally,
kids, you're going to get excited and motivated to leave
it's
better feedback as a teacher, I would think.
read An Ethic of Excellence by Ron Berger, where he talks about artifacts of excellence. Student work that acts as a way more powerful teaching tool and an assessment framework than anything a teacher could ever create, right? When learners get to be in this co creative collective atmosphere, when a teacher is not the sole purveyor of knowledge, but is a consultant, is a co learner, man, that is what learning's all about. That's what authentic learning is about on teams, right? That's how we train people post college to work. And so when we colonize learners to only get out perfect work, to do it in a lonely atmosphere, we set them up for failure regardless of if they graduate from Olin College of Engineering or from
Yeah.
Stanford or from Minerva or the mix, right? We have to give them agency and we have to make learning that communal process in how we measure and how we assess.
And, speaking of higher ed, one of the reasons I wanted to connect you to Beloit, my alma mater, is that they have been working on, one of the conundrums in higher ed is how do we make a liberal arts education relevant for the century that we're living in, and how do we communicate that, the value of that. And I think Beloit's done some interesting work on that, particularly in the entrepreneurial center that Brian Morello runs, that we interviewed him a couple weeks ago. So I think what's also fascinating about this too is that this can be used by students of all ages, really. I mean,
We
how
see it.
young?
We see a beautiful higher ed fit. We see
Yeah.
usage in third grade, kind of when Seesaw begins to look a little childish for
Okay.
we see really cool third, fourth, and fifth. There's God, check out John Nash, University of
Yeah.
Kentucky, wrote this incredible book on design thinking. I just get these emails from John. He's like using it with the second cohort. It's going incredibly well. Like Gareth Height, I don't know if you know Gary in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, Perkemian. Everyone needs to know about his usage. We see usage in the advisory space.
Oh yeah.
Waimea High School, an incredible school um, in Kauai, is using it in cohorts of young men that have sometimes fallen through the cracks in the DOE and systems. It becomes just as much an identity and SEL tool as it is a project-based learning or kind of deeper learning tool. And I would argue they're all beautifully intertwined, right? We
Yeah.
onboard everyone in Unrulr before I share the tool with this one question. We onboard whether you're a nonprofit, a corporation, a K-12 school, university, we ask them to start with a question like this, which is, who are you and what fuels you? And it's our way of kind of humans of New Yorking the education experience from the get-go. So whether you're in a junior math class or you're a senior in college who's studying design thinking, having visuals and video allows you to be seen, but also allows the entire private cohort in Unrulr to understand who you are and where you're coming from too.
And as we discussed earlier, I also connected you to someone at the college where my children have attended,
Sure.
Landmark College, which is about neurodiverse learners. Um, and because I thought it would be interesting for, kids who don't learn traditionally, or who may have some, um, who just other modalities might appeal to them, how that would work with them. And they have kind of a research arm at Landmark where um, they're doing things with kids and trying to figure out what works with neurodiverse learners. So how would, just in that vein, how does this appeal to students who may not necessarily be masters of the 5-paragraph essay?
It's
Uh,
differentiation, right? Sorry to interrupt. Like
yeah, it's fine.
it's giving them agency over what modality, what medium they're choosing to tell their story. And I'll show that to you in a second when I share my screen, like giving them the ability for video or for audio or for photography to be converged or to be by itself, to tell the story of what they're learning on, what they're grappling with, a display of skills. They're entering a world where there's a lot of different multimedia that allows them to tell stories. And we have to allow assessment to have that different multimedia and documentation to have it as well. And I think that's our sweet spot, right? Like I think that's what allows us to make assessment a lot more human centered.
So without further ado, why don't we, I'll let you share your screen, or you can go ahead and share your screen. And why don't you do a little demo um, of what it looks like?
Yep. Screen is shared.
There you are. I'll add you to the stream. There we go.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to
Please.
hide myself for a minute while I do a little housekeeping behind the scenes, and I'll let you take
Sounds
over.
great.
Okay.
So this is my version of a demo. I'm a teacher. I'm not an ed tech salesperson, although that's a core part of my job. For me, whether you're using Unrulr on your mobile platform or you're using it on your web browser, and both UX and UI is beautiful for either. Unrulr allows you to have your learners document who they are, their process, kind of reflections, and also product and outcomes in a way that's with a lot less friction, right? And allows them to do so in a user experience that seems similar to what they use to document already. And one of the powers of Unrulr is that you can localize and take your competencies, your portrait of a graduate, your core values, and use those as essentially tags. We call them COGS, concepts, outcomes, goals, or skills. In higher ed, you'd call this coding, right? And the hard part of coding is you do it at the end of your research. In Unrulr, your learners are coding from the get-go. It's a part of how they create a post. And so one, there's metacognition and reflection and kind of thinking about how they learn, helps them brand the post that they're creating, helps them think about what they're going to write. But two, it allows you to filter by them, for you to assess and micro-credential and say, this totally represents continuous learning, or you're not quite there yet. But it also allows other learners to engage in a private community, in a cohort of 10 or 20 or 100, in a way that feels much more communal and, in a way that feels much more relevant. One of the core parts of our product is storytelling and kind of summative deliverables. And the journey feature, which came out of our work with a big picture learning school, shout out to Ukiah in California, is this tool where learners can take multiple posts and turn them into this awesome timeline, this really great journey. And one of the biggest things I grappled with as a PBL teacher was I over-structured the experience. I started removing agency by having too many deliverables and milestones, too many formal proposals, too many project implementation plans. And Unrulr allowed me, as I was building the senior capstone program, to have learners self kind of identify their growth and their journeys in that process as well. Unrulr works through SSO or single sign-on, takes the login credentials of you and the school, and it allows for no login, usernames or passwords that have to be utilized. And so I'm showing you the web browser version, but the tool looks beautiful on an app, on a mobile device or iPad or tablet. And when I click on Unrulr on the web, you see my SSO for just a second, I'm taken to a home feed. And my feed is like the front page of Reddit. All of the learning communities that I'm a part of, I'm able to kind of share out and have in one specific place. But when I hit search, I'm able to find a specific learning community that my email is associated with, that I'm working with. And you see 16, 17, 12. These are the numbers of learners that are in this private space as well. So I'm going to click on one that I have permission to share. It is from Notre Dame de Sion, an incredible all-girls school in Kansas City. And I can see the cogs. I can see the tags, the competencies. Kelly Fast, one of their great administrators and teachers, has taken the school's portrait of a graduate, their Scion learner success outcomes, and he's turned them into cogs in Unrulr or tags in Unrulr. And he did this awesome lexicon work of not just having the skill, but also Scion's definition of what that skill means. Collaborative team player, solution-focused creator. And every time he creates a set of these cogs, it saves in his organization's library so he can use them and build upon them. And Callie can choose one or two of these, even as learners can. Growth-minded learner, mindful communicator. And when Kelly hits filter, he sees all the posts that these awesome young women have tagged with those different tags as well. And he can drill down on a specific learner. He can click on one specific student and be able to see kind of her posts and her learning as well. One of my favorite posts in Unrulr is all about not just the post itself, but the comments that emerged from it, the thread of conversation that emerged from it, right? And it allowed his students to be able to capture and like a daisy chain, build upon each other's comments. These awesome young women were creating period poverty kits for women in downtown Kansas City. They were discussing privilege, systematic inequality. They were talking about how these kits are not going to solve all the problems, but how they're chipping away and they're helping. And the teacher was a documentarian in this experience. And each learner ran through an inquiry protocol where now the artifact of excellence was not just the post, but it was in their comments. Claire building off of Caroline's, Lucy building off of Claire and Caroline's. So Unrulr now became a space, a community where they could comment and kind of engage in meaningful ways. One of my favorite use cases is actually me utilizing the tool with the great Pualani Lincoln, probably the greatest PBL teacher in the history of mankind. Pua also sailed on Hokulea, the Hawaiian navigational canoe that sailed the world only using Hawaiian navigational practices. And this was a senior capstone course. And the course was supposed to culminate in a voyage from the Big Island to Maui, only led by students. COVID got in the way and we pivoted, and students built their own products and services and stories that they shared out that had to do with their family. And so Pua used Unrulr in this private community of 12 learners as an onboarding tool. She told the story of last year's cohort, a cohort that also couldn't go on this sail. And then she asked her learners, who are you and what fuels you? And Pua, myself, and the other learners in this community got to see Naya's connection to the ocean. They got to see Sarah Taniguchi's connection to her ranching culture, right? And we were able to see it in mediums that they felt comfortable sharing. And so now we understood each other. We understood Ethan's connection to the ocean, Kavehi's connection, sorry, to music, Kavehi's connection to ocean. But Pua used this tool as a reflection tool. She used this tool to build a culture of reflection and process into her class. And when we would go to these sacred, holy sites, she would say, pull out your phone, document right now before you forget and get on the bus who you are and what you're feeling. And for Naya to write about her ancestry, right? The people in her lives that she actually literally felt in this moment surrounding her, to be able to document that in a meaningful way, right? For all of us to be able to reflect and capture something that we had permission to capture was amazing. And so many of these reflections made their way into these students' final presentations. In Hawaii, we say ho'ike, or celebration of learning, at the end of their experience as well. Naya was able to capture the building of the Ali'i surfboards that she was making. Other students were able to capture their process, kind of how they were going about wireframing their website. And I think one of the most important views in Unrulr is the self view. I, as a learner, am able to see every post I have ever done in Unrulr. I have this living and breathing portfolio, journal, whatever buzzword there is right now in education. But this is my knowledge base, right? This is evidence of who I am, my process, the products I've created. I'm able to create a journey, this incredible timeline that has dates that show my growth in a space. I'm able to present directly from Unrulr, a feature that came again working with this awesome big picture learning school, where they were tired of having their students take screenshots of their journeys. They wanted just to present from Unrulr. And now you can present in that Pechachuca style of taking all of the evidence of your growth and your learning, sharing evidence of who you are and where you come from, whether they're PDFs or photos or audio, and sharing it out in a kind of celebration of learning, not just a commodification of learning. And so there's this amazing ability that I haven't really seen in other tools, in a safe way with the right permissions, to be able to publish a post and share it out with the world. This is an image. My students call me Shornado. I'm a bit chaotic, and that's their kind of memifying of me. But there's an ability to publish a post and share it with your parents, with other stakeholders in your life. Not at the end of the experience. My critique of most portfolios is that they're dead documents, even if they're virtual. But I'm able to publish this. I'm able to unpublish a post. I'm able to publish it iteratively, and I'm able to curate this experience and turn it into a unique hyperlink and share it out with family members and other key stakeholders. We're constantly thinking about how we are able to make Unrulr a conduit to community learning, where not only my post is being captured, but also the first and last initial of the learner that's there too. And I've been pushing our CEO for a long time, he's a brilliant coder, to have a public portfolio as well. And if you notice, all of these white globes are posts that I can curate and iteratively publish or unpublish. And when I go to the top, when I hit this green globe, I'm able to publish a feed or a journal or a portfolio and turn it into a unique hyperlink and share out not just one post or journey, but all of the things I want to share in the world, right? All of the evidence of learning in the different communities that I'm a part of in a meaningful way. All of the moments that I want to curate and be able to kind of more beautifully share out throughout my learning environment. And I'm also able, as I click back, to kind of see the quantitative data, to see my comments, but also to see my trends over 3 days or 7 days or 28 days. What skills am I representing and manifesting? Each icon is one of the pieces of evidence, a post that represents wonder or design. I'm able to engage. Other teachers are able to check off and tell me if that post truly represents that space as well, our version of micro-credentialing. So for us, we're trying to make learning more joyous and human-centered, whether you're building out your own portfolio or whether you're kind of trying to learn within a community in meaningful places. So that's my beautifully unpolished shotgun approach to a demo.
I
But
love it.
I hope it resonates with the audience. I mean, I think I'm going to give you some TED Talk language, so you have
Okay.
to forgive me. Let me pull up an old slide I just did. So this is my theory of change in schools. Documentation begets transparency. Transparency begets trust. Trust begets agency. When there is documentation, oh my God, the things you're able to do in learning communities. When there is irrefutable proof and there's a culture of that, right? Then it's not just something you're finessing at the end of the experience. There's so much for you to curate from. And that's really the goal of our product, to be this knowledge base for learners that they can pull from when they want. The pensive in Harry Potter, just to geek out, right? Where you're putting your memories and your thoughts and your experiences and where you can kind of find them and share them out.
It seems to me that this would be really useful for student-led conferences. Have you
Oh
seen
my
any?
God, you totally get it. It's incredibly useful, both in middle school and high school and in that third, fourth, and fifth space. It's useful as
Yeah.
proof and evidence of a journey. I remember the great Bill Wicking, who taught me a lot of what I know. He helps run the energy lab at HPA, Hawaii Preparatory Academy. What he did was he had his learners publish one of their posts and email it to their parents. And there was this parent who was very passionate email response said, I never have to see a grade. You've shown me,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm tearing
I
up.
love
Like,
it.
you've shown me who my daughter is as a scientist and her process, right? And because her post was filled with video, right? And this parent so beautifully saw his daughter, as a learner for the first time. Because a grade, the narrative that teachers copy and paste when they're doing their advisory reports and
Yeah.
change little bits of it,
Yeah.
right? Like, I know this game, I've played this game.
Yeah.
Or really, really good ones spend an extra 17 hours writing. Like, no, this is evidence, right? Of
Yeah.
who they are and what they're doing.
Yeah. That reminds me of one of my former colleagues who would write like 3-page narratives literally for every, 125 students that he had. He was known for this, and it was his badge of honor. But, I don't know if it's necessary, but it was a noble effort. I'd rather have kids telling me, if the kids are telling you what they learned, then you know that they've internalized it, right? That it's been impactful, that it means something to them. And that's ultimately what we're trying to impact, not the teacher's writing skills.
This work is culture, right? It's about, like, and I was naive, like, dropping Unrulr into a learning community, it's going to revolutionize their spaces. The world of ed tech has lied to schools for decades, right? It's kind of a sketchy space, to be honest with you. And I'm navigating these waters in ed tech now. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, because I'm now work at a company, but I think what we're trying to do is under promise and to say this is a tool that's really powerful, but it requires humans, right? And
Yes.
it requires decolonizing how learners think about themselves, about getting work out into the world. It requires authenticity so that they're not just taking perfect images or doing TikTok style videos with perfect lighting. The best videos in Unrulr are always horrible lighting and bad audio, but there's raw authenticity in a learner talking about kind of a peak or valley in their process.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so the ed tech world, I don't think, again, what excites me is tools that will allow students to publish and to create and to take ownership of their learning. Um, and you don't see, I'd like to see more of these kinds of tools. So this is exciting to me. I love Book Creator, for example, or I'm trying to think of some other ones, but we've, even I just think we've lost sight of what the potential of technology is. And I'm not really interested in another drill and practice kind of software where,
Totally.
I mean, I'm sure it sort of serves its purpose, like for language learning, or, something that where you need a lot of repetition. There's a place and time for it. But I see companies um, focusing on that, um, rather than on the creative piece. And I think because it's harder to come up with something like this to
Totally.
solve a knotty problem, like assessment. It's harder and especially when you're trying to scale. That's another favorite ed tech word there.
Sure.
Um, I think it's difficult.
I mean,
Um,
imagine, can I one
yeah,
super quick
yeah,
thing? Imagine you're using Unrulr. and your school starts in 6th grade. And by the time your learner graduates, you have hundreds of posts that really show who they are and their growth. And they use that to build a sense of confidence and curiosity, to go from passive to active. They use that to apply to colleges that make sense, to have this beautiful annotation of who they are. They use that to get internships and jobs. An Unrulr portfolio is so much more rich and nuanced than the weird first resume they're creating for a job or an internship.
I
So
that
that's what's exciting for me, that whole
yeah.
school adoption, that district adoption, but also a small community utilizing it. That's the power of the tool.
The one there are two things that I also will add. The teacher cannot check out with this. This is actually, I think, might be an interesting professional development tool.
It's used a lot in PLCs and communities of
If you
practice.
want to talk about student work and
Yep.
talking about,
See
how you
beautiful
got
fit
in
and
there and
PD
that
in
sort of
teacher
thing,
training.
I think that might be an
Yep.
interesting thing. But you absolutely cannot check out if you're a
No.
teacher using this. And so,
Right.
how do you do this well? I guess my question for you is, how do you do this well? Let's say a grade level or a department in a school adopts this. How do you ensure success that everybody's using this fairly robustly?
You build it into the assumptions of your program. No ed tech tool is used unless it's supposed to be used,
Yeah.
right? This is not Flipgrid. This is not Kahoot. Like both are amazing and
Yeah.
incredible products. But this is your knowledge base. This is a learning base, right? I don't want to call it an LMS because there's not, I mean, I don't know. I grapple with LMSs, but
Yeah.
like this is a tool that builds accountability culture, right? This is a tool that allows your learners to display. And every teacher, I say, you better have posts in there before your learners go in. You better be commenting. It's a core part of the tool, right? Like, I think great teaching is modeling. If you're asking your learners to tell you who they are, you should visually show
Yes.
who
I
you are as
I
well,
totally agree.
because it creates that collective co-creative atmosphere where we're all learners in those spaces.
And
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 so
I
I mean, I think we see
yeah.
success when it is built into the operation structure of a program, of a grade, of a class.
So are you seeing more, because I feel like that philosophically aligns with a lot of independent schools where the structure and the politics and the everything is completely different, and than public schools. And not that one is better or worse, it's just different. And in my experience in the independent school world, there's a lot more autonomy for adopting something like this and running with it. Are you seeing more private schools kind of who have that autonomy gravitate towards this, or is it, the interest kind of spread between the two kinds of schools in the US?
Most of the innovation in this country is happening in public schools,
Yeah,
in
because
places where we would not, where at least my liberal bias did not think it would be. Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, PCBL, personalized competency-based learning. Not just like CTE to work programs, but student agency programs. I think there's a lot of grappling
yeah,
in innovation in private schools. There's a lot of school within
yeah,
schools,
yeah,
right? But
well,
there's not whole cloth,
yeah,
right?
and yeah, that's true.
Prestige and endowments have ruined innovation across the independent school sector, right?
I think the pandemic has something to do with it too. I feel like
Totally. And
I
and I
feel
think
I
that
feel like schools in general have become more, inwardly focused rather
and I
than,
think
yeah.
I mean the answer is both. There are amazing independent
Mm,
schools that are using Unruler and teaching us about its usage. But we've thrived in the public school world. We've
mm,
thrived through big picture learning schools. We've thrived in Hawaii with programs like Waimea High Schools that are rooted in Ha, a DOE framework. Ha means breath in Hawaiian. It's an
yeah,
SEL framework utilizing native Hawaiian words and having those as competencies within the tool. We've thrived in communities that need something like Unruler, right? It's easy to innovate when you have an unlimited budget. You
yeah,
can throw whatever buzzword at your students, right? And to be fair, we're seeing incredible usage in those kind of private, independent, well-funded schools too. But one of the coolest things about our clients,
yeah,
our schools that we work with, is there's an incredible socioeconomic diversity in the schools that we work with. And I think that's what's really exciting, to not just, um, start or
yeah.
incubate in one community, but to kind of work with a bunch of different learners.
I had a question from something that you just said, and I lost
Yeah,
my
and
train of
pardon the
thought.
overpassion
No,
and like
no, I love
overzealousness.
it. This is great. Here's another thing. What kinds of going back to neurodiverse learners? Obviously, kids don't have to write, a 5 paragraph essay for this, but they do, they could do some writing. Is there anything that is built in or you're thinking about building in to make it easier for kids um, who may have difficulty with language retrieval? I'm thinking about a friend of mine who told recently who told me that her child had been assessed and had very low working memory, for example. And so are there things that can be built into this that will help different kinds of learners, other than the different modalities of how they present the information?
Yeah, I mean, there's things we do already. Annotation,
Okay.
where a learner on a mobile device or iPad can annotate, and be able to build that stuff out. Um, there's my 6-year-old is joining the conversation. I'll just
Hi.
show him for a second. Can you say hi, Kainoa? Hi.
Hi.
Go to Tutu, and she'll bring you something. I'll be right back. So I think this is
The
the joy
fun.
of parenting with a 6-year-old. So I think there's things that we have in there already that help, and there's tools that we want to build out
Yeah.
where it annotates video or audio and allows you to kind of build those pieces out as well. And there's so many areas of growth we have in terms of making it an even more equitable tool. But I think what we've seen is, from all different kinds of communities, there's an ability now to choose and have choice
Yeah.
over how you're documenting and kind of assessing yourself. Oh, thank God I love my boy, but I'm glad he ran out, or he'll
Okay.
probably run back. No, we're good. No, I think, and to
I'll
be,
let you go in a
to,
second.
I don't
One
need
more
to go
question.
to overshare.
Yeah.
My 6-year-old son who just walked into this room is neurodivergent,
Yeah.
right? And I constantly think about, how he's going to learn, right? And I constantly have, I see his superpowers, but I have anxiety as well, thinking about, how he displays and assesses his knowledge. And that 100% drives me to think about this tool as a tool for equity for all of our learners too.
Love that. That's great. The last thing I want to point out to people who are listening, and my friend Elaine is here, and she was mentioning reflection earlier. But one of the things I really liked uh, about this is that you can customize those skills, habits of mind, whatever, in this platform. And I think that's what we've been talking about 21st century skills for like 21 years now, or however long, and how we measure those. And in this platform, you can actually designate for your institution what those things are that you want to
You
document. And
you
I just
create
think
your own
that's so
cogs.
important.
You like, and that was why Will built it,
Yeah.
right? Is this ability to localize assessment and what you want to track. And you create these beautiful libraries of all of these sets of cogs, all these sets of competencies that your organization can use as a template or build off of. We also have a public library. To reflection, this is a reflection tool. There is so little reflection in learning communities. There's so little culture of learning reflection in learning communities, right? And I've always been guided by this concept of lean startup
Yeah.
methodology, right? And the methodology, this business methodology, is build, measure, learn. It's this cycle. It's like a liquid scientific method. There's very little measuring and learning, true measuring and learning in learning communities.
And,
And what we're
or teaching kids how to reflect.
or
I mean,
teaching kids how to, and John Nash at the University of
yeah,
Kentucky is using Unrulr. It's all video prompts that he's using in Unrulr. I wish I would have shared it another time, but like he all he cares about is displays of metacognition and
yeah.
thinking about how they learn. That's all he cares about in his undergrads and in the PhD students that are using the tool. And so Unrulr as an exit ticket reflection tool or a during experience reflection tool has been some of our biggest areas of growth as well.
And here's a comment from Elaine, that I'll put up there for everybody to see.
Thank you, Elaine.
So hopefully Elaine will be in touch with you to talk about. I'm putting her on the spot. Um, so Aaron, I love this conversation, and hopefully you'll come back sometime and tell us what's new and exciting with it, and get involved with some of other activities in this community. We just had a meeting this morning and kind of talking about some other events and things that we're planning. So I will keep you posted. For those of you who are listening, I'm going to pull up my slides again, which with Aaron's information, if you want to, that's not Aaron. That
No,
is
it's another
that's
handsome
me.
gentleman.
That's last week's.
All good.
Here's Aaron here. Here's Aaron's contact information. You can find him on Twitter and Unrulr on Twitter as well. And in 2 weeks, or not 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, we're going to our next presentation is going to be with our next interview is going to be with Bob Greenberg, who is super interesting. Bob is a retired, maybe second or third grade teacher in Connecticut. I met him a number of years ago. He actually interviewed me when I was in New York for something in the middle of Columbus Circle. And what he's done is he's gone to thousands of educators, from people like, lowly people like me to like famous educators that we know. He just interviewed somebody at Princeton, Eddie Glaude, who I see on TV all the time. And he's interviewed all these educators all over the world. I don't know if all over the world, but all over the US, and has created this repository on YouTube. It's called Brainwaves. And this has been his retirement passion project. And
It's amazing.
it's amazing. And so it's been a long time since I've talked to Bob. So he's coming in to kind of update us and tell us more about it, and hopefully get more people involved with it in general. But so I just want to say, come back anytime, Aaron, you want to interact with other people. Hopefully we'll get more people going in the audience as we get more consistency with this. And so that you get to know our community and that sort of thing as well. You're always welcome to come in and be. The whole point of this is to be a professional learning community where, people can throw their LinkedIn profiles into the chat or whatever and connect with others, or reach out, after one of these sessions to one another. I think in light of the pandemic, we really want people to get reconnected again. And face to face is awesome. It would be great to be together all the time, but that's just not physically possible in this world anymore. I was just at an ed tech conference in my state this week, and it was fabulous to see people, and I could have conversations I wouldn't necessarily have over Zoom. But I don't think this kind of way of communicating and connecting is going to go away. And if we can leverage it for good, then we'll keep doing it. So anyway, thank you for coming today, everyone. The broadcast will be up on YouTube immediately ending, and we'll see you, I think it's March 17th with Bob Greenberg. I'm going to stop broadcasting, and then Aaron and I will do a little more chatting.